Welcome all the folks in town for Rolling to Remember. We're here to bring awareness and accountability for POWs and MIAs. This month marked the 48th year since the last American casualties in the Vietnam War. Yet for some of those families, those years didn't bring closure as they waited for their family members to return. Before I introduce our Master of Ceremonies to begin today's event, I call your attention to the empty chair here as a symbol of the 1,579 Americans who still remain missing or unaccounted for from the Vietnam War. Yet in remembering them, we must all recognize that we shall not rest until there is the fullest possible accounting of those who remain missing from the Vietnam War. We've made it our tradition that during our Memorial Day ceremony, we read any names the Pentagon has approved to be added to the memorial and the names of any of the missing who were repatriated the previous year. As you are able, please stand. There were no names added to the memorial this year. I will now read the names of the 3 service members whose remains were found, identified, and repatriated in 2022. Sanford I. Finger, Staff Sergeant, United States Army. Thomas F. Green, Private First Class, United States Army. Larry A. Zitch, Chief Warrant Officer, United States Army. I'm sure you'll all join me when I say, welcome home.
Welcome home.
Please be seated.
I literally just checked the weather 5 minutes ago. Tell you
But this is the version of our Washington, D.C. liquid sunshine. So you're welcome. I arranged this especially for you. We're loving it. It's always a good day to be at the wall, no matter what the weather. Now, to begin our ceremony, the person who's going to stand here in the rain ceremony, I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies today, Alan McCabe. Over the last 23 years, has spent more than 12,000 hours as a volunteer here at the wall, helping literally millions of visitors. A few years ago, Alan also became a member of the Board of Directors of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Please welcome your Master of Ceremonies, Alan McCabe. There's a rumor that it rained in Vietnam.
Marine Corps sunshine. I love it. It's Marine Corps sunshine.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. This is the 41st Memorial Day ceremony here at the Wall. Across America at this very moment, millions of barbecue grills are being lit. Families are getting ready to go to the lake or the local swimming pool. Picnics are being planned. Children enjoying an extra day off from school. But you have chosen to be here at the Wall, on the National Mall, to remember not just the 58,281 men and women who are engraved in this black granite wall behind me, but the more than 650,000 Americans who gave the last full measure of devotion in all of America's foreign wars, from the Revolutionary War to Iraq and Afghanistan. They truly gave all of their tomorrows for all of our todays. This great experiment in democracy will celebrate 250 years of independence in 2026. Independence and freedom paid for through their lives and the sacrifice of all of our nation's veterans throughout America's history. Thank you for remembering them all on this very special day. I would like to start our ceremony today by welcoming our chaplain to provide today's invocation. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel William H. Horton.
Like I and the chaplain for Patton did pray for the rain to go away. If you would please join me in prayer. Almighty God, we've gathered here at the Vietnam Memorial to honor the veterans who paid the ultimate price in the preservation of democracy. We're grateful for those who served heroically and made the ultimate sacrifice. Our nation's sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers answered the call in a time of crisis, and they laid down their lives for the love of God and country. In sending your son as a sacrifice for freedom, you understand the grief and the pain that families and friends experience during loss. For your love and compassion, they never fail. Anchored in this holy truth, we continue to pray that as a nation we will not compromise life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness when confronted by evil forces. Ignite within us the godly faith and enduring strength necessary to respond with a similar courage as the heroes that we honor today. Inspire leaders of our great republic with integrity, honesty, and steadfast hearts, dedicated to defending and preserving the dignity and freedom of all people. May we continue to be blessed with remarkable service members, motivated by their faith in you and their dedication to our nation. Bless this ceremony and all who share in this memorial. Bless our military, those deployed around the globe and their families. And God bless America. In your precious and holy name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Horton. And now, please welcome the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard from the Military District of Washington for the presentation of the colors. Please stand as you are able and remain standing until the colors have departed. Color Guard, present the colors. Now please welcome Master Gunnery Sergeant Kevin Veneer to sing our national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Alyssa Rhyme, Gold Star granddaughter of Joel D. Coleman, remembered behind me on panel 7 East, line 1 and line 29.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, retire the colors. Thank you to Gunnery Sergeant Kevin Benier and to Alyssa Ride. And you may take your seats. Each year, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund holds this ceremony in partnership with the National Park Service. Please welcome today Jeff Reinbold, Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks.
Good afternoon. It's Holding Chapel. Veterans families, Gold Star families, honored guests, on behalf of the National Park Service, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. The memorial, conceived and built on behalf of a grateful nation, is not only a reflective and contemplative space to honor those killed in the war, but also to recognize the more than 3 million American men and women who served in the conflict. Today, we also remember the 265,000 women who served during the war, in particular those that did not return home, here and at the Vietnam Women's Memorial. I'd like to offer a special welcome to the veterans and their families who are with us today. It's incredibly meaningful, and we're honored that you chose to spend it here. I'd like to thank our partners in this endeavor, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, especially its President and Chief Executive Officer, Jim Knotts, and Stacy Madalena of the America's National Parks, which provides educational programming for the Women's Memorial. Those two individuals, the organizations that they represent, are instrumental partners in protecting and maintaining these memorials and ensuring those honored are not forgotten. I'd also like to recognize our National Park Service staff. You see our rangers who are here, interpret and maintain this magnificent memorial, and a special thank you to the volunteers. You know them in their yellow hats and gear. They help greet, educate, sometimes console the more than 5.5 million visitors who come to this memorial each year. The experiences the volunteers bring to the site, the generosity in sharing those experiences make a visit more meaningful for so many. The monuments and memorials along the National Mall bring us together as Americans to reflect, to learn, to inspire. They help tell the story of our nation and the narrative of its people. They remind us the costs of war and of our responsibility to ensure those lost are not forgotten. They also speak to our current day. For more than 40 years, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial has been a place where everyone, regardless of opinion, can come together and honor those who served and remember those who were killed. Architect Maya Lin said in an interview about the memorial, "I just wanted to be honest with people. I didn't want to make something that said, they're gone for a while. I wanted something that would simply say, they can never come back. They should be remembered." That's what we do today and every day. We in the National Park Service, including the volunteers and along with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, are honored to be entrusted with the care of this memorial and of their memory, and to welcome the millions of visitors who come here each year. For 40 years, we've taken great pride in making sure those that visit remember the more than 58,000 Americans who gave the last full measure of devotion to their country. We remain committed to doing that, not just on the last Monday of every May, the National Day of Remembrance, but every day, for the coming 40 years and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Reinbold. One of the most interesting things as a volunteer is after we've had a rain, watching the names reappear on the wall. You can see the water dries off and the names suddenly start to reappear. It's just like magic. Of course, the sun's hitting this side, so they're coming a little clearer over here, and then this side will slowly start to appear. It's now my pleasure to introduce Susan Kramer O'Neill, who will speak on behalf of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. This November will mark the 30th anniversary of the dedication of the Women's Memorial. Susan was born and raised in Indiana. She's a veteran of 3 Army hospitals in Vietnam, where she served as an operating room nurse for 13 months, from 1969 to 1970. First with the 22nd Surgical Hospital in Phu Bai, from May through August 1969, followed by the 27th Surgical Hospital in Chu Lai from August until November 1969, and lastly, the 12th Evac Hospital in Cu Chi from November 1969 until June 1970. During the years since then, Susan and her husband Paul, whom she met in Cu Chi, raised 3 children and moved more than a dozen times, mostly in New England. She's worked in hospitals and nursing homes, as an instructor in a nursing lab, and as a lounge singer. Yes, I had to look at that twice. So, lounge singer. It was great to have on the resume. She also did a stint in the Peace Corps in Venezuela, 1973 to 1974. She's been a reporter for weekly newspapers, worked in public relations, and in a public library as a children's storyteller. She now lives in Brooklyn with Paul and freelances as a writer, editor, and author mentor. She's the author of 2 books, Don't Mean Nothing, a collection of short fiction loosely based on her hitch in Vietnam, and Calling New Delhi for Free, a volume of brief, mostly humorous essays. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vietnam veteran Susan Kramer O'Neill.
It's nice of you to bring the little lady up here. I fully expect now that now that God's messenger has made this work, that probably what I have to say will make thunder and lightning come down. You never know. I mean, I've never really been big on memorials because I always thought that they were glorifications of war. You know, the dudes on the horse waving the saber and the dudes carrying the flag and all this stuff. So when this wall happened, I fell in love with this memorial, and it was amazing to me how I could see people stand at it and they'd be in tears, and it would reflect it, and they touch the name, that they can't touch the person anymore. And I've done that myself, because there's a Fort Wayne name up there. The first guy who died in Fort Wayne, Merlin Markford, to whom I dedicated my Vietnam book. But it was something that wasn't glorious, because when you're a nurse, you don't see a glorious world. You really don't. You see the results of the war. Anyway, before I invoke the lightning and thunder, Diane Carlson Evans, who obviously can't be here today, worked for 10 years to make that monument over there, which is also a phenomenal monument, because it doesn't glorify anything, but it has brought a certain amount of healing to our population and has made us understand that people do appreciate us, and that some people are still looking for us, you know, for the anonymous nurse who took care of them. That just will rip your heart out. It's just amazing what that does for people, and I'm one of them who has had that happen. But at any rate, she can't make it, and she says she's not making it a secret, but she just had her first chemo treatment, and anybody who can do what she did for this, I'm sure this is a battle she will win. But the reason I'm telling you is because I think that there's a healing quantity too, in people thinking of you and people sending energy to you. Might be prayers if you're so inclined, it might just be good thoughts, wishes, whatever. So do that for Diane. She's at home, I believe at this point, in Montana, and you know, send her some good thoughts, send her some feelings. Anyway, because I was an operating room nurse, I don't know any of the names on the wall that belong to me, because we didn't traffic in names. We never heard them in a lot of cases, so if we did, we forgot them because the next case would come in. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a poem, and I beg your indulgence because I'm too lazy to really be a poet. I'm just a writer. But this was in response to a call for letters to let people know what people who were related to or understood or as Vietnam vets had been through things that would give us a special relationship to the wall. And I wrote, an operating room nurse speaks to the Vietnam Wall. And let's see. My face in your slick black mirror lurks undefined, over graved letters that bear no link to men I knew for moments or hours, to men over whose inert body I passed threads, you know? Nylon, gut, steel, too fragile to bind restive souls into their broken casks. To men over whose secret red meat my gloved fingers probed before it fell still. You deal in names. I deal in nameless shades that slipped anesthetized shells, that left me numb, dumb, stunned. My hand too weak to grave labels in my brain. You are past history, her story, our story. 58,286 hungry ghosts, among millions here, among billions over there. Ciphers that, though graved, my memory cannot touch. Pragmatic cost of time-blind grief. O black mirror, call your phantom legions to formation. Call them to march howling, waving flag transparent roar. Call them to spill their precious wasted blood, bones, meat on grand oak desks. Their sweet lost dreams of manicured hands of the powers that were, that be, that will be. Call them to grave on foreheads of kings and presidents and dictators and generals in funeral black the vast permanent cost of transitory wars. Call them to trumpet their names for all who have eyes and ears and hearts and mouths, for all who have wisdom and fire and love and outrage. Call them to stand ruined and proud, relentless and brave before the stone. Call them to fix us with their flamed, unwavering eyes until we feel the price that they we all have paid and cry, enough, enough, enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was beautiful. Jim told me I was welcome to sit up here during the speakers, but he failed to mention that there's a big puddle of water here in the seat, Jim, so it's all right. I'm going to come back down with the speakers. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Colonel Bud Traynor, United States Air Force, retired. Colonel Dennis Bud Traynor retired from the Air Force in 1995 after a distinguished career culminating as the commander of the Field Operating Agency Air Force Flight Standards at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. Bud's first operational mission in January 1969 was to fly to Saigon in a C-133 Cargo Master from Dover Air Force Base. In 1971, he was reassigned to Cam Bay to fly the C-7A Caribou in support of forward deployed troops all over South Vietnam. When troops were withdrawn in 1972, he was reassigned to Travis Air Force Base to fly the massive new C-5A Galaxy. Bud's last mission in Vietnam was as the aircraft commander of a C-5A Galaxy transport, the ill-fated aircraft that on April 4th, 1975, suffered major hydraulic failure and crashed shortly after takeoff while airlifting orphan children out of Saigon during a program that was called Operation Baby Lift. There were 330 aboard the plane. Miraculously, there were 176 who survived the crash, though sadly many did not, including 11 of his crew listed on the wall on panel 1 west behind me. Colonel Traynor received the Air Force Cross, the second highest award in the Air Force after the Medal of Honor, for his heroism and airmanship in saving that aircraft and the lives of so many. The Air Force Cross citation reads in part, with no aircraft controls except one aileron, and by adjusting the power and the left and right engines, he managed to guide the aircraft to a landing in a rice paddy, thereby saving the lives of 176 aboard. Many of the volunteers who are here today have met some of those babies that were on Operation Baby Lift. They're adults now, but thanks to Colonel Traynor, they survived that crash. He currently lives close by in Fairfax, Virginia with his wife Pamela. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel Bud Traynor.
Service members' ultimate sacrifice, we also acknowledge the families' loss, grief, and continued healing. Gold Star families, I salute you. And I want to acknowledge those here today whose lives I touched 48 years ago. I'm especially honored to be asked to speak on this sacred day in this hallowed place. It's my honor to pay respect to those who sacrificed their lives to defend all of us. We need only visit Arlington Cemetery with its 300 graves to begin to understand the true sacrifice of war, or this beautiful wall behind me, 58,000 names of men and women that do include my 11 from my C5A, who for love of country sacrificed all. I salute them all and their families. From that Decoration Day held in May of 1868 to this Memorial Day today, we honor all of those who paid the ultimate price for us, for America, for you and me. The Vietnam was truly unique. Those who lived it knew, in that the body count was brought to us every night on the radio or television. Not many wanted to go to war, but they did so out of patriotism, duty, and love of country. So how did some of these people end up on the wall? Among others I knew who are on this wall, I had a close and personal experience with 11 names on panel 1 West right behind me, including, I believe, the last female to be added to the wall. They were part of my crew on C5 Galaxy 80218 that crashed in the fallow rice fields just a couple of miles northeast of Saigon's Constitute Airport. My crew got up that day on April 4th expecting it just to be another Marine day. Let me tell you their story. My background, how did I get in the military? I was drafted. And I can assure you that Vietnam was not on my bucket list. I was a music major at the University of Georgia, and when I was drafted, I was chosen to be the flute and piccolo player for the 3rd Army Band. Well, my wife, who's sitting here, my wife-to-be at the time, her father, who had been in the Army as a scout, and then later in the Air Force, looked at me and said, "You'd make it better in the Air Force. You should see if you can get out of the Army into the Air Force." So while my wife was in class, I went down to the recruiter and he explained to me that, well, because I started advanced ROTC, his paperwork was older than mine. So he could get me into the Air Force. But there were no spots in the band. Would I mind being a pilot? I didn't realize at the time what a fantastic opportunity he was offering, and of course I never looked back over 28 plus years in the military. Back then, Vietnam would be our country's focus for many years. After completing pilot training in Del Rio, Texas, in 1969, my very first real mission was that training mission from Dover Air Force Base to Saigon, and then the massive C-138 Cargo Master. Not many people even know what that is. That's because most of, my hat, thank you very much. Because the 133 Cargo Masters were in the way of the C-5, and so they were quickly cut up into Coors scans, except for the few that's primary mission static display. As a result, I was assigned, as they said, to Cam Ranh Bay flying the C-7. And I can tell you that's a magnificent airplane. It's a STOL aircraft and it can land anywhere. We'd land on 1,000-foot strips and we'd carry the beans, bullets, bombs, whatever they wanted. But too often we would fly back with the fallen. I was there at Cam Ranh Bay in '72 when President Nixon withdrew all the forces and then was subsequently assigned to Travis to fly the C-5 Galaxy. In April of '75, near the end of the Vietnam War, when Saigon was within just days of falling, my C-5 Galaxy crew began a seemingly routine mission out of Travis Air Force Base, California. And I'm certain that none of my crew, including me, was truly aware of the gravity of the unraveling situation in Vietnam as we transited Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines. None was aware that 2 days before we left, World Airways had made the last, albeit unauthorized, evacuation from Da Nang, as Da Nang was falling without resistance to the communists. None was aware during crew rest at Hawaii that Nha Trang, north of Saigon, had fallen. Nor, while we were en route to Guam, that Cam Ranh Bay, where I had been stationed, once the U.S.'s largest military base in South Vietnam, had also fallen. Nor that World Airways was evacuating 57 orphans from Saigon, despite being forbidden to do so by the U.S. ambassador. He didn't want to panic. This all as 5 North Vietnamese divisions were amassed some 75 miles north of the city. None realized during our crew rest at Clark in the Philippines that President Ford on TV said that he had directed Air Force C-5A aircraft and other aircraft especially equipped to evacuate 2,000 Vietnamese orphans and bring them to the United States. About 6 a.m. in the Philippines, while I was eating breakfast, I was told that 22nd Air Force Command Post wanted to talk to me. And then, without even hinting of President Ford's televised promise, I was asked strange questions like, how many passengers could I take out of Saigon? Really? Oh, and many would be children. Well, including the 73 seats upstairs in the troop compartment, I figured we could take another 1,000. The command post then told us to floor load as many orphans as we could take, and then turned around and asked me, what did I need to do that? I was the next pinball in the pinball machine. I didn't know anything about that, but I did know about kids because I had his father, who was 2 years old, and my youngest son was 2 weeks old, so I knew what little kids needed. So we cleaned out the BX and commissary of Pampers, diapers. We got 500 juices, 500 milk, blankets, pillows, and bottles. We were good to go. For adult leadership, we are also assigned a lieutenant colonel, a MAC mission observer, and they also alerted the Aerovac crew, the medevac crew, to accompany us to Saigon. I'd never flown Aerovac, but what the heck? Great, off to Saigon. We flew there, uneventful, offloaded the howitzers we were carrying. The blue school buses from the orphanages showed up, and we bucket brigade loaded the back of the C5 with the kids. The littlest kids we would put upstairs in the 73 seats, put 2 to a seat, put a blanket, bottle, fasten the seat belt, went on to the next seat. So there's 2 kids to a seat. Everybody else we put downstairs. Everybody was at the top of their game. The crew, everyone, offload, onload, passengers. Everything went smoothly and professionally. About 12 minutes after takeoff, just entering the South China Sea, just off the coastal city of Guangzhou, passing 3,000 feet, the locks on the aft ramp suddenly failed, submitting to 93 tons of pressure. The rear ramp and pressure door blew out, causing catastrophic loss of control, severing all flight controls to the tail, and severing 2 of our 4 hydraulic systems. It was a classic rapid decompression, just like we trained for in the altitude chamber. And when the fog cleared, the troop compartment, as expected, checked in. They did it first, followed by other major crew positions. Then they all reported there was no panic and that the passengers and crew were secure. Well, almost. At that point, nobody realized until later we had lost our first crewman. Student flight engineer, Staff Sergeant Donald Dion, line 122 on the wall. He had been standing on the ramp near the troop compartment ladder, monitoring the passengers and their bags. When the ramp blew off over the South China Sea, it took him with it. I started to return put my nose down, head for 10,000 feet, as with procedure. I knew that's where all passengers could breathe without supplemental oxygen. But upon rollout, we were inexplicably too low, blasting through 10,000 and heading for the ground. The engineer had immediately reported loss of 1 and 2 of the 4 hydraulic systems. I sent another crewman downstairs to assess the damage, and he confirmed that the ram fell off. Thank you for the offer of the This is replaceable. What I was saying, anyway, the ramp and pressure door were now both gone, and the crewman said that the flight control cables to the tail were stringing out behind the airplane like spaghetti, which was not good news. That damage, as they said, left me with 1 aileron and engine power to fly the aircraft. I had 0 elevator or rudder control. And this is important too, employing techniques that I learned from my father, who was a World War II era pilot. I added full power in the dive to bring my nose up. And how did I know to do that? Because he would teach me to do that to make an underpowered World War II biplane do a loop. I can tell you that flying biplane and flying the C-5 are pretty much the same. Well, systems, maybe. While the co-pilot and I were desperately trying to figure out why we had roll control but no control to the tail, MAC Mission Observer Lieutenant Colonel William Willis, line 122 on the wall, asked for permission to go downstairs and assist with taking care of the passengers and crew in the cargo compartment. So, medical technician Staff Sergeant Michael Paget, line 121 on the wall, who had been climbing the flight deck ladder when the rapid decompression occurred, had been struck in the face by the breakaway flight deck door. Flight nurse Captain Mary Clinker, line 122 on the wall, was also forward of the crew entry, attending to Staff Sergeant Paget's injuries, as nurses would do. Airport's audiovisual service photographers Joe Castro, line 123, and Kenneth Nance, also line 123 on the wall, were using their light bars to illuminate diaper changing and continued to film the unfolding tragedy. There, medical technician Tech Sergeant Denning Johnson, line 21 on the wall, continued to reassure and care for the passengers in the cargo compartment. Second co-pilot Edgar Melton, line 123 on the wall behind me, who was only on his second trip that morning at Clark, went out to the BX and bought a camera and all the film that he could carry. And he continued to document the human drama of the calm demeanor of Loadmaster's Master Sergeant Wendell Kane, line 123 behind me, and Tech Sergeant Felizardo Aguilar, line 122 on the wall, while administering oxygen and attending to the refugees in the cargo compartment, contributed to their reporting to me that nobody downstairs wanted to go back to Saigon. They wanted me under all conditions to go on the Philippines. They knew the seriousness. After bringing the altitude oscillation under control at about 7,500 feet, I had Saigon City and the airport in sight, and the emergency gear extension was in progress. I was hopefully optimistic. I was a captain. Unfortunately, nearing the runway, with the additional drag of the gear coming down, I couldn't keep a bank. I had to roll out straight ahead, and I still thought I was going to take it straight ahead. But we hit the ground at a normal about 500 feet per minute, which is a normal descent rate if we were landing on a runway. But in this case, we were going about 300 miles an hour, which is about 3 times too fast. We glanced back into the air across the Saigon River and then chewed our way across the rice paddies on the other side. When we landed on the other side, on that second impact, Tech Sergeant William Parker, line 123 on the wall, who was in the troop compartment caring for the littlest children upstairs, some of whom are out here today, stood up in the aisle, having successfully punctured the inflating emergency slide or right, only to become a second impact casualty. The aircraft broke into its component parts. The upper deck survived largely intact. The cargo compartment unfortunately crushed and was abraded away along with the crew and the floor-loaded refugees. The tail dropped off, the wings and upstairs troop compartment with the youngest refugees flew up slightly, leaving the skidding flight deck to roll inverted and turn 180 degrees. Unencumbered by the rest of the aircraft, the wings then carried the troop compartment for a relatively gentle 1,000-foot skid, broke off. The wings proceeded further downwind and burned by themselves, breakaway away from everything and everybody. The flight deck came to a stop and somebody yelled fire. I was clever enough to realize that it was probably time for me to leave, so I cranked open the pilot's window and stepped out, which normally would be 33 feet off the ground, and I stepped out into the marsh. As I was outside, I reached back in, got my hat. I was outside. Military guys would know. I walked around the end of the flight deck, and the crew that went with me brought out survivors out of the wreckage, and I got to really credit Air America. They were on us in about 4 minutes. And they helicoptered the casualties and survivors to local hospitals and to Thailand. So, on April 4th, 1975, there was this ordinary crew who by fate and circumstance would become destined to be the first military crew to support Operation Baby Lift, only to crash shortly thereafter. I want to remember and reflect on my fellow aircrew members who joined many others on this wall behind me, who perished 48 years ago this past April 4th. Like all of the fallen recorded on this wall, those 11 crewmen had no expectation that they, that day, would be called upon to make the greatest sacrifice. By God's grace, many did survive that crash, but there are 11 names of my crew on that wall behind me who did not. 138 people died that day, but 176 survived, lived the American dream. I'm proud and honored to have served. Thank you. God bless our troops, and God bless America. Thank you, Jim.
This isn't in the script anywhere, but I'm wondering if it's okay to ask those that survived the crash that day, if you're here in the audience, could you stand up, please? Trainer, thank you so much. Powerful speech. If I could ask those who are laying wreaths today to please come forward and take. And first of all, I'd like to have a chat with the chaplain, and I question his connection to higher powers. Whether seems his connection is somewhat tenuous. But anyway, we made it almost to the end. So while our wreath bearers are getting in position, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge some folks in the audience. First of all, I want to thank the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. You know, they're the ones that all the years that we've been here, they do all the ceremonies and events. They've got an education program for schools and educators. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund does the wall that heals, the 3/4 size replica that travels all the way around the country. They're recording stories for Vietnam veterans on their website. They also have the very powerful in memory ceremony here in June. We've honored over 6,000 men and women who have passed as a result of their service in Vietnam, but whose names are not eligible to be on the wall, from Agent Orange exposure, PTSD, alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide. They're not forgotten, and they're remembered at the in-memory ceremony. VVMF maintains the database for the wall, and just this last year managed to completed the project of having a photograph for every single one of the 58,281 names on this wall. We have a photograph of every one of them. The ongoing maintenance is largely paid for by VVMF, and as a board member, I was so proud this year. We approved the purchase of enough granite from the same quarry that we used in 1982 to completely replace the entire wall if it should ever be damaged. So we've got that in place. So just amazing work to Jim Knotts and all of the team at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. I also want to thank the National Park Service for their continued pledge to preserve and protect America's national treasures, not just the natural ones, but the memorials here on the National Mall. And a little bit selfishly, I'd also like to thank the more than 100 men and women who volunteer here at the wall. The Yellow Hats, as they're called, they come from all over the country to give their time here at the memorial. Technology has allowed visitors now to look up the names on the cell phones. But as long as the story needs to be told about the wall, about the Vietnam War, as long as visitors need help finding a name or doing a name rubbing or just need a hug or somebody for a veteran to tell their story to, there will always be need for a volunteer here at the wall. What a very special group of individuals to have given so much of their time to help others. They are here in force today. Thank you so much to this unique family of volunteers at the wall. And now allow me to direct your attention to the representatives of several of our nation's leading veteran service organizations as they will join us in laying wreaths to honor the fallen. But at this time, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome bagpiper Chris Jackson, who will be playing Amazing Grace. For our wreaths, the National Park Service, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the Vietnam Women's Memorial, the American Gold Star Mothers, Gold Star Wives of America, Sons and Daughters in Touch, Vietnam Gold Star Children, Jewish War Veterans of the USA, Disabled American Veterans, Military Order of the Purple Heart, Paralyzed Veterans of America, the National Park Service Volunteers of the Wall, Vietnam Veterans of America, the Scottish American Military Society, the Associates of Vietnam Veterans of America, the 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock PTSD class, Washington, D.C., the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing Association, Vietnam, the 28th Infantry Regiment Association, the Black Lions, the Verizon Veterans Advisory Board, the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, the American Legion, the A6 Intruder Association, the family of Lance Corporal Clarence Willis Obey III, the United States Army OCS Alumni Association, the U.S. Army's AmeriCal Division, and AMVETS. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing today, let me encourage each of you to reach out and to thank our veterans and their families, not just on Memorial Day, but every day of the year. Thank you all today for coming. And our ceremony will conclude today with the playing of taps by Gunnery Sergeant Michael Warnick. Would you please stand for the playing of taps? Thank you all for coming today, and for those of you joining us online, the ceremony is now concluded. Thank you.